So for those of you that don't know, and I'm not entirely sure that any of you exist, but on Monday, Wizards announced that they'll be doing the banned and restricted announcement 1 week early. Everyone was speculating as to why, people was blowing up on Twitter, yada yada yada, and then bam, bam, bam. Wizards bans Smuggler's Copter in Standard, Wizards bans Emrakul in Standard, and Wizards bans Reflector Mage in Standard. That is a big, big deal. Standard bans do not happen often. They've only happened 10 times in the entire history of the game, and only one of those was within the last 10 years. Opening a booster pack and getting a card that you can't play with really sucks. There's already been a bunch of Facebook posts in my local area of newer players asking whether or not these cards are now banned in Draft. This might sound silly to you and me, but to lesson franchise players, opening a big fancy Mythic Eldrazi and being told, oh no, you can't play that, is really jarring. It's not a good play experience, and Wizards tries to minimize when they bring down the ban hammer on standard cards. They try and make sure they only do it when absolutely necessary. And some people don't think this one was necessary. Brad Nelson talked about how bannings like this should only be reserved for when things have to change. And reaction across the board has been mixed. LSV is surprised, but he's happy with the changes to Modern. Tom Ross is happy with the changes despite having stock in all of these decks. When the standard ban hammer comes down, it should be for something that everyone agrees is necessary, and that doesn't appear to be the case here. However, if we take a look back at other times the cards were banned in Standard, we can get a little bit of insight into what's going on this time around. The last time cards were banned in Standard famously was Jace the Mind Sculptor and Stoneforge Mystic. Wizards of the Coast cite GP Dallas Fort Worth as an indicator of how oppressive these cards were in the format. Every deck in the top 8 featured Jace, and half of them featured Stoneforge Mystic. Cards being this ubiquitous is not fun. It makes for a less diverse play experience. If we look at the most recent Standard GP today, which was GP Madrid, we see this. The top 8 contained 14 copies of Emrakul, 16 copies of Smuggler's Copter, and 7 copies of Reflector Mage. Those are high levels of Copter and Emrakul, sure, and anecdotally people have been saying they've been a little bored with the Standard format. But to ban cards in Standard is a very heavy trigger to pull. Smuggler's Copter is too ubiquitous. Lots and lots of decks are happy with a 3/3 beater that also loots. We'll get to Emrakul in a minute, but the question here really lies on Reflector Mage. Why is it being banned? Sam Stoddard from Wizards of the Coast states that their data showed that Blue-White Flash was the strongest deck in the format. Now their data is taken from Magic Online, which has a slightly different meta from your average local game store, but they found that the deck was so good that it needed to take a hit, and Reflector Mage was that hit. Of note, the last time an uncommon was banned was Skull Clamp, and Skull Clamp and Reflector Mage are very different classes of card. In a world without Copter and Emrakul, Wizards thought that Blue-White Flash would rise to prominence and that Reflector Mage would be too big a part of that. So if Smuggler's Copter is too ubiquitous and Reflector Mage would have filled the gap left by it, why is Emrakul getting banned? You don't need to look any further than the banning previous to Stoneforge Mystic and Jace to see why. Going back, we get to Arcbound Ravager and the Artifact lands. Michael Yicha has an excellent article on the history of standard bannings on the Wizards website. In it, he cites the banning of Arcbound Ravager and the Artifact lands as being due to their combo-like finishes. Not even combo finishes. Combo-like. Combo-like in the same way that getting an Emrakul on turn 5 or 4 is a combo-like finish. So the question then is, why is Wizards of the Coast so adverse to having combo decks be a thing in Standard? The answer is newer players. Imagine you're a newer kitchen table player and you've cobbled together your Servo tribal deck. If you go to F&M, you're probably going to get trounced by the majority of the field. And that's okay, so long as you still have fun and so long as you still learn something. If your opponent uses Aetherworks Marvel to get out an Emrakul on turn 5, you didn't learn anything other than that Emrakul is really, really good. It's not a satisfying experience, it's not the experience that Wizards wants new players to have, and honestly, it's not the experience that anybody wants new players to have. If your first couple of games of Magic aren't meaningful, then you're not going to stick around long, and Wizards really, really needs new players to keep the lifeblood of the game flowing. Don't get me wrong, personally, I really like combo decks. I think they're fun, but I do also know what it feels like when I play on Magic Online, even in a cube or something, and I F6 while my opponent storms off. It's not interactive, I'm not doing anything. In Modern, it's a little bit of a different story. If we look back before Twin was banned, it was a staple of the format to hold your bolts and your counter spells when your opponent tried to land their Twin on their Exarch or on their Pestermine. You can't have that kind of power level in Standard all the time. Except, Wizards did just print Twin again. This brings us to a part of the announcement that has been a little bit overshadowed. There is now going to be a second banned and restricted update 5 weeks after the Pro Tour with every set. This gives Wizards a little bit of a chance to react to the rhythm that Standard can follow. A set comes out, it's picked apart by everyone online, all the best cards and combinations are thought of. The pros brew their decks and demonstrate them for everyone at the Pro Tour, and that establishes a baseline for the meta. Don't get me wrong, things change, and the meta right after the Pro Tour is rarely the exact same as the meta by the time the next set rolls around. But there is that little bit of a rhythm there. And this banned and restricted announcement lets them correct if something huge happens at the Pro Tour that establishes things. I don't know, say everybody plays a new version of Splinter Twin, for example. I'm just using the whole Splinter Twin thing as an example. I'm not sure if the shell is even really there for the deck. But I think this secondary announcement midway through the set release is to give Wizards a chance to shake things up if things grow too stagnant too fast. In the announcement, they do specifically state that they don't expect the number of actual bannings to go up, but they need to stick to that. If players start to feel like the format changes rapidly every couple of weeks, they're not going to want to play it. Considering that at the start of this video I talked about how incredibly rare standard bans are, I think we can have a little bit of faith in WotC that this won't damage standard much. What it'll do for Eternal formats, I'm not exactly sure. We'll see if Wizards decides to shake things up more often. Please let us know in the comments below what you think about the bannings and what you think about Wizards' new banned and restricted structure. Do you think they're going to be banning cards left and right, the standard's going to be moving ridiculously fast? Or do you think this is just a release valve they're putting there in advance in case things go awry? Until next time, I'm Denis from Windmill, and does anybody want to buy a playset of Smuggler's Copters?